All right, so welcome to another episode of Seven Figure Screw Ups. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Jordan from the Art of Charm. Hey, Jordan. How you
Hey,
doing?
thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
All right. So in Seven Figure Screw Ups, we basically talk about big screw ups, and we'll talk about Jordan's screw up today and try to learn from his story. To introduce a few words about Jordan, so I was introduced to him through one of my friends, and since then I've been listening to his podcast. He runs a website called The Art of Charm, where he teaches people how to master social skills, social interactions, get rid of any fear and anxieties they have from social interactions, and really them to the level where they can very easily, comfortably interact with others and become power networkers, but also bring that into relationships with their loved ones, their friends, family members. So, was that an accurate introduction?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, you nailed it. Definitely. Yeah, I would say it's essentially what you described. Yeah, we try to have brilliant people come on and then ask them smart questions so that they can teach what they know to the rest of the world. And usually revolves around human performance, human behavior, networking, relationships. And that's essentially what we're looking for. So, yeah, we'll have a CIA agent come on and talk about reading body language. We'll have an FBI hostage negotiator come in and talking about negotiation technique. We'll have some of the founding scientists, Robert Cialdini, come in and talk about influence, and Larry King will come in and talk about conversation. So we like to think it's giving people access to the best knowledge around from the people who are best at it. And that's what we've been doing for 10 years.
that is excellent, and that is probably the reason why, as I just learned, you passed 3 million downloads last month in
Yes.
for your podcast, which is pretty amazing. 3 million per month in 1 month.
Yeah, I'm also really excited about that milestone.
That's awesome. So let's dive straight into the screw up. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is really, how was life about before the screw up or failure that you would like to talk about? Where were you in life wise, but also like business wise? What was happening?
Yeah, so for me, I've picking one failure or one screw up was really tough because I can look all along the way and find plenty of screw ups where I messed up and flubbed. And I guess let me start with a question for you. Do you want a question or a screw up, I should say, that started in the beginning of my business, or do you want a screw up that started even before we officially started the business? Because I feel like there are just so many.
We can also cover two if you
Yeah,
want,
okay. I want it to
but
be
we
a
can start
conflict.
with one that, let's say that if you are in a position of wanting to start an online business or just started and you're having first successes and first revenues and customers, we can pick one that you think you would
Yeah,
like to hear at the time.
I've got one in mind already, sure. So do you want me to just dive in and describe it?
Yeah, I would be first interested to know where you were just before
Oh,
the
just
first
before
success.
that.
Yeah,
So I was an attorney on Wall Street, and I had just started the Art of Charm podcast in my friend's basement. We'd been going for maybe a year or two, and then we were on satellite radio, which had picked up our show. So we were doing a radio show on satellite, the podcast itself, and I was still a lawyer at that time. So I was a busy guy.
okay, so that was your side project. So you basically were thinking of turning that into full-time entrepreneurship and
Right.
not being not working as a lawyer anymore, right?
Kind of. I mean, I figured I'd be a lawyer for maybe 4 years, and then eventually my business would scale or not, or it'd always be a side gig or I'd sell it. Yeah.
Got it. So at
Yeah.
that point, when you started the business, was that it's hit from the basement? Was that a point where you already had some customers, or you were basically creating content and just starting to basically build audience?
Yeah, we had a lot of customers actually. Not hundreds and hundreds like we have now or thousands or whatever. But we had a few dozen, but they were all high ticket items because we still run a school we have in LA. At the time it was in New York because I was working on Wall Street. We have a school where we teach body language, nonverbal communication, persuasion tactics, influence, things like that in a residential setting. So people come in and live in the school for a week and go through the program. So we had a fair amount of clients coming in every week and staying at our place at the time in New York, now in LA, that were coming through. And so we were just barely surviving. I mean, I think we were paying ourselves enough to eat food every day, not save anything, and absolutely not that much discretionary income. I mean, we largely relied on the same social skills that we were teaching back then to eat and drink and go out and get by because we were scraping by. I mean, I was a lawyer, so I was okay, but everybody else on my team, we were just barely earning enough to pay them, and I wasn't taking a salary at that time.
Got it. So you were just gaining first traction. There was some profit, but a very small profit, and generating some revenues, first customers in that kind of workshop settings or 1 week.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. And so, I mean, that sounds like, since you already had first customers, it sounds like you already had some initial validation that the business could be there and that there may be a business model. So what happened then?
So yeah, I essentially made a really classic mistake, which was I was treating my business like a hobby, and that was good for gaining traction and things like that because we weren't looking at all these distractions, or I should say, we weren't looking at the things that were discouraging and thinking, oh, well, this isn't feasible. It was just a hobby. It was fun. We were doing it. It was making some money, and I was fine. And I was focusing on my law career. So what that did, unfortunately, was it made me think, look, I can simply create a group of people that I really enjoy working with, and this will be great. And what happened was I ended up needing to hire people that were going to provide $60,000 to $100,000 worth of value to the company, but I was only able to pay them 25 grand plus pay their rent or something like that. So the only type of people that you can hire in that situation are people that really believe in your vision. And the people that really believe in your vision and also trust you and are willing to work for less than they're worth in promise of a higher return. Now in startup land, that's very common, but back then in 2006, nobody was really thinking about it. The only people who were willing to do that were your friends. And so I hired a bunch of my friends, and I made several mistakes of thinking, well, I come from Detroit. I've got a Midwestern work ethic. I work my butt off until the job is done. I'm tireless. I have integrity around this. I found that my friends were great friends. They were fun to hang out with, but they had very different concepts of what they were worth. And they had very different concepts of what they were entitled to. And they had very different concepts of what it means to work hard. For me, that meant 12 plus hours a day. For some of my friends, towards the end, it started to mean waking up around 2 p.m., working for 20 minutes on whatever they felt like doing, and then cracking open a cold one or leaving the office and showing up on Monday. And so eventually, obviously, we had to start letting some of these people go because I'm not going to give people equity, let alone pay them a salary, if they're not going to work. And what I found, unfortunately, was a lot of these people had decided that what I was doing couldn't be that hard, and they were just going to do it themselves, which I welcome competition. However, they weren't doing this ethically. They were using office resources. They were stealing our client lists. They were appropriating intellectual property, and they were basically white labeling things without permission. And on top of that, not only were they doing that, they were telling those clients, oh, don't buy from Jordan and the Art of Charm. We've got this better thing. And we found out because our clients were and are very loyal. And they said, look, I just between you and I think something's going on. And I didn't believe these guys at first. These clients, I thought, oh, it's just an administrative mistake. I'm sure there's something going on. And I only started really looking into it and finding out the misappropriation and the outright theft when interns started to say, oh, yeah, we were working really late last night on the new logo. What new logo? Oh, yeah, we're going on a business trip next week. Business trip? No, you're not going anywhere. I run the company with my business partner, AJ. You guys aren't going anywhere. And then I would ask the other guys where they were going. Oh, yeah, I'm going home to visit family. Well, why is Mitch going with you? Oh, he's going to hang out with my family. Okay, that's weird. And then I'm like, well, this isn't really all adding up. And then finally, when I needed to be hit over the head with a virtual hammer here, was a client of ours that had been a client for a really long time, a really good friend of ours, called and complained and said, look, I didn't want to complain before because I love you guys and you changed my life, but so-and-so has been late for the last 3 out of 4 of our coaching calls. And I said, coaching calls? well, you don't have a coaching package with us. That guy doesn't handle the coaching calls. Johnny handles the coaching calls. So finally that started to pull the thread that unraveled the whole sweater. And I found out they were essentially running a shadow business using AOC clients, AOC resources. And this is like 8-9 years ago now. So
and they were friends. The one that
they were friends of mine. They were friends of mine that were living in a place that I paid for. And
so you had them hired. So it's two of you who were running the business, AJ and you, and then you had several people hired for your friends to help you grow your business, and they basically started working for less than you expected. I mean, when you hire friends, there's a certain level of trust that you expect will be higher.
Exactly.
Right? And what actually happened, from what you're explaining, it backfired completely on the other side, where they started unethically behaving and not just making your business stay flat, but also be affected negatively in terms of reputation.
Yeah, it was, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible judge of character. What right do I have to teach the art of charm, for example? But what it turned out, and this is like 2020 hindsight, based on years of sort of looking back, even now. It was really one guy that kind of put the idea in the head of other people that were basically just interns here. So although I think some of the interns are kind of silly for doing this because they gave away a really great opportunity, and their company that they were working with inside our office, once they got caught, I mean, it folded within just days. And they got sued, of course. And even the settlements that came out of that were not in their favor directly. So it's really, really sort of one toxic seed. But when you look at it, you think, wow, I hired this person and he was really good at his job. I think it's somewhere along the way, he went, I'm entitled to more. And instead of working for it within the parameters of our agreement, or even talking with us about it like a normal person you would think would do, they just went, well, since I'm entitled to it, I'm just going to take it. And since I know I can't do it on my own, I'm going to take resources from Jordan and AJ in the Art of Charm. And that was really disappointing, because not only is it a kick in the, because it's your business, but you're thinking, wow, like I put you up. You used to live in a trailer, right? Or whatever. I mean, we were in college, so it's not like these guys are horrible people. I mean, we were just college kids. This is their first job out of college. And looking back, I don't even necessarily totally blame them. I think there was a lot of, I always try to shift the blame onto what could we have done differently? Not the blame maybe, but the extreme ownership would say, what did I do wrong there? And I look at this and I think, oh, okay, bad hiring, willfully ignorant of bad practices, and treating people like friends when they should have been treated like business partners. It's not to say never hire your friends. It's just to say never hire and manage and be responsible for managing your friends. If you want to hire a friend, great, but treat them like every other employee, and you should not be their boss. Somebody else needs to be.
Yeah, and there are people who run their family businesses, and it can work, but there are certain things to do to manage that properly. Now, I'm curious to understand what was the impact of what happened on you in your life, in business sense, in emotional sense, in relationship aspect.
Yeah, what happened from a business perspective was we ended up spending a lot of money on a lawyer and a whole legal case, which I would not do again in the same way. It was unnecessary. I mean, suing somebody who's broke into being broke for longer, who cares? It's not worth the stress. It's not worth the expense. It's really silly. And, had we just let him go, I think it would have been like, oh, well, okay, we had a good run. Instead, it was this protracted battle. Which also took a toll on us emotionally. We started looking at all of our employees that we were friends with a veil of suspicion. We started auditing everybody's work. We fired a ton of people, most of whom, honestly, were not performing up to snuff. But plenty of people were let go just because they were adjacent to the situation. And it was like, look, we just don't want we don't want to have to worry that you were his roommate for 3 years and now he's gone because of this and you're still here. We just can't deal let's separate. And so that was tough because not only did we lose employees that were bad, we lost employees that were okay, and we lost friends that were good. And so me and AJ started to people, and we started to become a little bit more selfish with the way that we dealt with the business. And it took us a few years to recover and realize, like, okay, look, we brought this on ourselves by doing certain things wrong. These are bad people that shouldn't be working with us anymore, but we don't need to then treat every single person who crosses our path as some sort of potential thief. It's just not good. It's like when you get married and then if you get divorced and you start saying things like, all men are this way or all women are this way. It's clearly not true. It's just a result of your emotional triggers being fired so strongly. And it took us a while to recover from that. And it honestly, looking back on it, the level of stress, the depression that we were going through at some level at that point in time was not worth it. What we should have done is just been like, oh, you're stealing from us? Okay, you're fired. Next. And gone on with our lives and not made a big deal out of it. It was us focusing on this problem and being wounded that caused more damage, right? It's like if you get a sliver from a piece of wood, what you do is you go, oh, shoot. And you get tweezers and you yank it out and you put some alcohol on it and you call it a day. You don't take a rusty grapefruit spoon, sharpen it on the concrete in your driveway and dig a hole in your arm to get it out. And that's, I think, what we kind of did by getting angry and being upset and suing and all this stuff. We really just we made it much worse for ourselves in the process of getting rid of these guys.
Got it. And as you said, it took a few years to recover. So it sounds like it's never only about the business mess that's created, but also, especially when your friendship is involved, you kind of lose also people in such process. And I assume that having such experience, which I think is great, having at the beginning of business. I mean, looking back, probably is great. I'm wondering how did that one instance help you in the future, probably related to the way you do hire today, or you hired a few years ago.
The way that it changed how we hire is, well, one, I don't do a whole lot of hiring myself. Two, I absolutely don't look to hire people I already know. I just look to hire top performers. I will work with friends on informal projects, but now it's almost always something where there's no money involved or where I purposely give them a really great sweetheart deal so that they don't feel burned and that I just do it mostly like, look, I'll promote your thing because I want you to succeed. And I'm not going to worry about tracking and affiliate payments and this and that and the other thing. I will just help you. That way, when they look to help us, they look at that with the same mindset. Or they don't want to help us and they're the type of person I don't really want in my life, right? But if they're willing to help us and we're willing to help them without remuneration, what this allows is for us to create relationships where we don't keep score. And that's very, very useful because if I help my friend Noah Kagan, for example, he just launched a podcast. I helped him launch it. I had put him in touch with my producer. My producer's taking time away from, in theory, time away from working on The Art of Charm to help Noah out. I'm not asking him for money. We're not charging him for any of our consulting or expertise or anything like that. And then later on down the line, and even before that, since Noah and I have been friends for so long, we help each other on other things. We don't think, well, I helped Noah launch his show, so now he has to mail out my info product to his whole list. Like, it's just anything that becomes transactional becomes complicated, and then somehow everybody feels like they got the short end of the stick, or you have to do so much negotiating and so much, this has to be this way and this has to be that way and good faith this and good faith that it becomes tedious. Whereas if you just decide to help other people without keeping score, then you're not worried about getting the short end of the stick. And somehow, and I put that in air quotes, through the mechanisms of goodwill / the universe, so to speak,
karma.
You just feel right, which I hate those terms in general. I'm not like that at all. But basically, you just if my goal is to help you now, then I can accomplish that goal really easily. And then if your goal later is to help me and I'm not worried about extracting value as a return, as reciprocation for me doing something before, if your goal is just to help me and it's a clean one-way thing, then it's perfect. And I'm not saying, well, I helped you this way and you only helped me that way. And now I'm mad about it because we have this covert contract, this agreement that went unspoken, that you would help me in an equal way. Now I'm secretly mad at you. You don't know why I'm being unfriendly to you. And then our friendship has this weird thorn. It's got this weird sliver that we don't know how to remove until 3 years later. I'm hanging out with you. You leave the cap off the toothpaste and I try to stab you, right? Because it's all built up over time. It's really toxic. So I just don't keep score, and I create relationships where we don't keep score, where scorekeeping is not possible, where I can't get value in return right away, where I don't see how that person could ever help me. I want those relationships because they tend to come back and be helpful. For example, this intro through John Corcoran, he wasn't thinking, if I introduce Bozy to Jordan, then they're going to get along really well, and then later on I'll be able to ask them for something. That's not the calculation. He's just being helpful. But of course, what that creates is anytime he needs help with anything, I'm going to be first in line.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of lessons in what you're saying. I mean, one related to the business topic and the way you hire and distinction you make with friends or not friends and transaction versus non-transaction. But also, I think what you said and the way you deal with partners can be applied to relationships. A lot of people are in their relationships, they are keeping score, and I take the garbage out and you'll do something for me. And I'm sure that this has been discussed in your podcast with your guests. That's just how relationships don't work. So
yeah, we call that covert contracts, and it happens in relationships all the time. It happens in every type of relationship. Yeah. For example, if you're in college and you've been driving this girl to and from the airport because you're friends, but you secretly hope one day she's going to turn around and realize you're the guy, it's a covert contract. You get mad at her when she doesn't do that. If in business I help you and I expect you to help me and you do later, but it's not what I had in mind, my expectations that were uncommunicated were not met, I get mad at you. That's because of a covert contract. You see this in business. You see this in your personal life. Husbands and wives have it. Like you said, you do the housework. Yeah, you do the housework and then I'll do this other thing. And then what ends up happening is one person does the housework and then goes, why aren't you ever doing anything for me? And it causes a whole drama because of a covert contract. If someone had said, look, I'll do the housework, you make sure things are repaired. If both sides know what their obligations are, they can both follow through. So you end up with these covert contracts, you end up with reciprocation problems, and you end up with losing the well.
And then it explodes in some little thing like who moved the plate.
Exactly.
What would be, I want to ask you one more question and then ask you, I want to kind of let know people how they can find you. My question is, how do you as already a seasoned entrepreneur handle fear of failure on a day-to-day basis? Like a few tips, how do you do it?
Yeah, I know that most things I try are going to fail or at least not have the results that I expect. So it's kind of funny because it goes along with keeping score. If I test something, I look at it like, oh, that test didn't work. Am I disappointed that I didn't crack the code? Yes. Do I think, well, we should just pack it in and go home? No, because I know that it's all a matter of iteration. I couldn't have started The Art of Charm and the podcast, the Art of Charm podcast as it is now 10 years ago, because I didn't have the testing. I didn't have the feedback from the listeners. I didn't have the skills. There was all kinds of things that weren't in place. And so realizing that it's all, and this sounds cheesy, but I mean it, really all about the process and the journey and things like that. You have to learn how to enjoy that. And you realize that failure is a part of moving forward, in that it's not just like failure is always moving forward or fail forward. I hate those stupid maxims. You're supposed to avoid failure, but you're not supposed to avoid failure at all costs and not test things and figure out better ways to iterate and create new things. So I just look at it as part of the process and I don't worry about it. I really don't ever worry about it because I'm zoomed out so far on the time scale that if I look at what we did this week and it didn't get us any new show fans or any new email opt-ins, that's fine. If I look at what I did this month and it didn't, that's a bummer, but it's fine. If I look at it in a year and it didn't, then we need to course correct. But over 10 years, it's like investing. Over a decade, you can be pretty terrible at investing. And if you diversify enough, you're still going to see growth. It's just not going to be as flashy as the guy who says, I got 80,000 email subscribers off one webinar. Buy this product. I don't care. I'm happy for that guy if it's true. And it'd be great to see that kind of result occasionally. And you do sometimes. But really what I'm looking for is over the course of 1, 3, 5, 10 years, what have I built and grown? And has that worked? And that's much more important than what did I do today and did that move me forward. That's a great mindset to have, to try to do that. But the problem is, if you do something and it moves you backwards, do you cry in your cereal or do you figure out some other way to make it right?
Right, exactly. And having that big picture view is like phenomenal strategy. And I see the more I do these interviews in the seven figure screw up, the more I see that pattern, honestly, within successful entrepreneurs, being able to really zoom out and think like, will this matter in a year? Will this matter in a month? Or will this matter in 10 years? And then get the right perspective about it. And then, as you said, failure is an inherent part of the process, which is hard to kind of internalize. All right. Thank you. This has been a great short conversation, though. And I was wondering, just wanted to ask, so where can people find you? Is artofchart.com, or is there an additional?
Yeah, people can go to theartofcharm.com, or if you're listening to podcasts, which I recommend, search for the Art of Charm podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify for some users have that enabled. The Art of Charm, yeah, we would love to have you here. We teach a lot about persuasion, influence, networking, mentorship, anything that people can apply in their business and especially in their personal relationships. I think there's something there for everyone. I mean, we've done it for 10 years, so if something doesn't stick, we gotta figure something else out, right? We've done something wrong.
Learn your craft. All right. Thank you so much for being a guest, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Bozy.
Bye.